At 6:15 on a Tuesday morning in April, the engine of Darius Jackson's 2022 Peterbilt 389 rumbled with a low, steady growl that was more felt than heard. The sound was a constant in his life, the deep-throated hum of the $180,000 machine that provided his $68,000 a year living. He was parked on a quiet, tree-lined street in Belle Meade, Nashville, a neighborhood where the houses were not just houses but estates, set back from the road behind acres of manicured lawn. A gentle rain, more of a persistent mist, slicked the asphalt and beaded on the vast expanse of his windshield. Each droplet caught the pre-dawn glow of the streetlights, turning the glass into a field of tiny, shimmering jewels. Darius, at 38, was a man built for his profession, tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet strength that settled in his hands, which rested now on the worn leather of the steering wheel. His deep brown skin was luminous, even in the dim, green-tinged light of the dashboard. He had just dropped off his wife, Tanya, at the front door of her mother's house, a sprawling, white-pillared colonial that was valued at a cool $1.2 million. It was a routine he knew well. Before any long haul, he'd bring her here to stay with her mother, Patrice, so she wouldn't be alone in their modest duplex in Bordeaux, a world away on the other side of town. This trip was a 3-day run to Dallas and back, a straight shot down I-40 and then I-30, hauling a full load of Tennessee-made auto parts. It was good money, consistent work. As Tanya had stepped out of the cab, she'd given him a quick, almost perfunctory kiss. "Drive safe, baby," she'd said, her voice already distant, her eyes on the grand entrance of her mother's home. She was carrying her $1,800 Louis Vuitton purse, a birthday gift from him that had taken 3 months of careful saving. He watched her hurry up the flagstone path, a slim, elegant figure disappearing into the warmth and light of the house. He was supposed to pull away immediately to get a jump on the morning traffic, but he always waited a minute, a silent ritual of ensuring she was safely inside before he merged back into the world of highways and deadlines. He was a man who believed in small acts of care. It was the language he knew best. He had no idea that this one small act, this brief, quiet moment of waiting, was about to detonate his entire world. Have you ever felt that the ground beneath your feet was solid, only to discover it was just a thin crust over an abyss? Darius was about to learn the difference between the life you think you have and the one that has been operating in the shadows all along. The facade of their life had been built with his sweat and her taste. The duplex on Booker Street in Bordeaux was his, a legacy from his grandmother, Elara, who had worked 2 jobs for 40 years to pay it off. It was a simple brick building, solid and unpretentious, with 2 identical units side by side. Darius lived in one, the other he rented out to a quiet school teacher for a modest $1,200 a month, money that went straight into a savings account he rarely touched. The total value of the property was maybe $350,000, a fortune to him, but a pittance in the world Patrice and Tanya aspired to inhabit. He remembered the day he'd met Tanya at a friend's barbecue. She had a smile that could light up a room, and a way of looking at him that made him feel like the only man in the world. She was beautiful, with elegant braids that fell past her shoulders and a laugh that sounded like music. She hadn't seemed to mind that he was a trucker. In fact, she'd claimed to admire it. "It's such an honest way to make a living, Darius," she'd said, touching his arm. "Seeing the country, being your own man on the road." Their courtship was a whirlwind of simple pleasures. Picnics at Centennial Park, long walks across the John Seigenthaler pedestrian bridge, evenings spent on the small porch of his duplex, listening to the cicadas. He'd fallen hard and fast. When he proposed a year later, with a simple, elegant $2,500 diamond ring he'd financed, she'd cried and said yes without hesitation. But after they married, her mother, Patrice, became a more constant presence. Patrice was a formidable woman, a real estate agent who specialized in the high-end Belmead market. She carried herself with an air of unshakable authority, dressed in $800 St. John suits and carrying a $3,000 Prada handbag. Her approval was a currency Tanya constantly sought, and Patrice had never, not once, fully approved of Darius. He remembered one Sunday dinner at the Belmead house, shortly after they were married. He had just spent the entire weekend replacing the gutters on the duplex himself, saving nearly $2,000 in labor costs. His hands were scratched and sore, but he felt a deep satisfaction in the work. He mentioned it at the dinner table. Patrice had arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You did it yourself? How industrious." The word was meant to sound like a compliment, but it landed like a judgment. "Tanya, darling, you must encourage your husband to focus on his driving. A man's time is his most valuable asset. He shouldn't be wasting it on handyman work." "Mama, he saved us a lot of money," Tanya had said, though her defense felt weak, her eyes pleading with her mother. "It's not about the money you save, it's about the money you fail to earn," Patrice had replied, taking a delicate sip of her $80 a bottle Chardonnay. "Every hour Darius spends on a ladder is an hour he's not on the road, not building a future. You two need to think bigger than that little duplex." Darius had simply nodded, gripping his fork. He didn't see the duplex as little. He saw it as freedom. It was paid for. It was his. It was the one piece of solid ground he owned in the world, a gift from a woman who had taught him the value of ownership. His grandmother Alara used to say, "Don't nobody cry for you if you ain't got a roof that's yours." The pressure was subtle, but constant. Tanya started talking about moving. "Babe, we could sell the duplex," she'd said one evening, scrolling through listings on her $1,200 MacBook Air. "Patrice says the market is hot. We could get a great price and use it as a down payment on a place in Green Hills, or even here in Belmead." "But this place is paid for, T," Darius had argued gently. "We have no mortgage. My truck payment is $1,500 a month. The insurance is another $600. Our bills are low because of this place. If we sell, we're taking on a huge debt." "It's called leverage, Darius," Patrice had cut in. She dropped by unexpectedly, as she often did. "It's what smart people do. You use one asset to acquire a larger one. You can't get wealthy by thinking small." He saw the longing in Tanya's eyes, the deep desire to please her mother, to live the life she saw in magazines and on social media. So he tried to compromise. He worked more, taking on extra runs, pushing his hours to the legal limit. He used the extra money not for investments, but for the things that made her happy. A weekend trip to a luxury spa in Asheville that cost $3,000, a $2,400 Burberry trench coat she'd coveted, dinners at restaurants where the bill was more than his weekly fuel budget. He thought he was showing his love through acts of service, through providing. He had no idea they saw it as a sign of his pliability. He was the workhorse, the engine that powered their ambitions, and they were the ones holding the map. The cruelest deceptions are often wrapped in the mundane. Over the past year, Darius had noticed a pattern. Tanya would present him with documents to sign, usually just as he was about to leave for a run, or when he had just gotten home, bone-tired and mentally fried. His mind would be on his pre-trip inspection checklist, or the simple desire for a hot shower and a soft bed. "Just some insurance renewals, baby," she'd say, her voice bright and casual, a pen already in her hand. Mama's agent sent them over. You know how she is, always on top of things. He'd scan the pages, seeing dense blocks of legal text that made his eyes glaze over. Words like heretofore, indemnification, and addendum swam before him. He trusted her. She was his wife. He'd scribble his signature where she pointed, his mind already 1,000 miles down the road. He was a man who understood torque ratings and air brake systems, not the labyrinthine language of contracts. He assumed she and her mother, the real estate expert, were simply handling the tedious paperwork of their life together. The memory of one such evening, about a month ago, now surfaced with chilling clarity. He had just finished a grueling 4-day trip through the Midwest, battling ice storms in Illinois. He was exhausted. Sitting at their small kitchen table, a $450 oak set Tanya had called a starter piece. She'd slid a stack of papers in front of him, thicker than usual. "What's all this?" he'd asked, rubbing his eyes. "Oh, just a bunch of stuff. We're refinancing the policy on the duplex to get a better rate. And there are some city forms about the rental unit. Mama says we need to get it all registered properly." She'd smiled, tapping a page. "Sign here, here, and initial here." He remembered a single page that looked different, with a large empty box at the top. It was a quitclaim deed. He'd seen one before when his grandmother's estate was being settled. He'd paused, his pen hovering over the signature line. "A quitclaim? What's this for?" Tanya didn't miss a beat. Her smile didn't even flicker. "Oh, that's just a formality. The insurance company requires both our names to be on the primary policy documents in a specific way, so we have to file this to add me to the title for their purposes. It's just paperwork, babe. It actually protects you more, according to Mama." It had sounded plausible, complicated, but plausible. And he was so tired. The thought of arguing, of trying to parse the legal jargon, was more exhausting than driving another 500 miles. He trusted his wife. He signed his name, Darius Jackson, in his clear, steady script. He had just signed away his birthright, the one thing of real value he owned, and he'd done it with a pen she'd handed him. The memory was so vivid, he could almost feel the cheap plastic of the pen in his hand, could smell the scent of the chicken Tanya was roasting for dinner, a dinner meant to soothe and distract. Now, sitting in his truck, another memory piggybacked on the first. It was from last Christmas. The whole family was at Patrice's house. He had given Tanya a beautiful pair of diamond earrings, a modest half-carat set that cost him $1,500. He was proud of the gift. Later, he'd overheard Patrice talking to Tanya's aunt in the kitchen. He was just outside the door, coming to get a glass of water. "They're sweet," Patrice had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But he has no vision, Jean. He thinks in terms of pretty baubles. I'm trying to teach Tanya to think in terms of assets. Real property. That duplex is a stepping stone, but he's anchored to it like it's a palace. He has a blue-collar mind." Tanya's aunt had murmured something inaudible. "Don't worry," Patrice had continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We have a plan. Tanya is very persuasive, and he's so focused on that big, noisy truck of his, he doesn't pay attention to the details. Men like that they trust too easily, especially when it comes to a pretty wife. Trucker husbands sign whatever we send." At the time, he had felt a hot flash of anger, a deep sense of being disrespected, but he'd dismissed it as Patrice just being her usual snobbish self. He had retreated, not wanting to cause a scene at Christmas. He had convinced himself that Tanya didn't feel that way, that she was just caught between her husband and her overbearing mother. He'd chosen to believe in the facade because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. The words had been a warning, a red flare in the night, and he had turned away, choosing the comfortable darkness instead. He had made a critical mistake. Each of these memories was a piece of a puzzle he had refused to solve. The casual condescension, the conveniently timed paperwork, the hushed conversations that stopped when he entered a room. It wasn't just Patrice. It was Tanya, too. She was not a pawn in her mother's game. She was a willing and active player. The outrage began to accumulate in the silence of the truck cab, a cold, heavy weight settling in his chest. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was a slow, freezing certainty, a disillusionment so profound it felt like a part of his soul was turning to ice. The moment of discovery arrived, not with a bang, but with a clear, calm voice cutting through the misty morning air. It was 6:18 a.m. His truck was so quiet, the Cummins engine purring so smoothly, that it was just another part of the ambient sound of the sleeping neighborhood. The high-fidelity microphone of his $400 Blackview dashcam, a device he'd installed for insurance purposes, was always active when the engine was on. It was designed to pick up conversations inside the cab, but its range was surprisingly powerful, easily capturing sounds from the immediate vicinity. Patrice stepped out onto her wide-covered porch, a white silk robe cinched at her waist, a cordless phone pressed to her ear. She must have assumed he was long gone. From his vantage point, he could see her perfectly, illuminated by the warm light spilling from the doorway. She paced back and forth, her voice crisp and businesslike. "No, the notary is scheduled for 10 a.m., she said, her tone sharp and impatient. "He's on the road to Dallas now. He'll be gone for days, just like we planned." Darius's blood went cold. He didn't move. He barely breathed. His world, which had been tilting for the past few minutes as memories surfaced, now shattered into a million pieces. Patrice listened for a moment, then laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound. Of course he signed it. It was mixed in with the insurance renewals last month. Tanya handled it perfectly. Trucker husbands sign whatever we send. There it was again. The exact phrase he'd overheard at Christmas. Not a stray comment, but a mantra, a philosophy, a strategy. Patrice continued, her voice confident and final. "Do you have his number? Good. My lawyer already has his number, just in case, but there won't be any trouble. By the time he gets back on Thursday, the title will be in Tanya's name, and we'll have the listing agreement ready to go. We should have a cash offer by the end of the month." She listened again, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Don't you worry about Darius. He'll be angry for a bit, but Tanya knows how to handle him. She'll cry. She'll tell him it was for their future, that it was a surprise to get them into a better house. He'll pout, and then he'll get in his truck and go back to work. That's what men like him do. They work." The words hung in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart piercing the heart of his marriage, his trust, his love. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie about someone else's life. There was no rage, no fire, just a profound, hollow clarity. The fog of love and denial had been burned away in an instant, leaving behind only the stark, ugly truth. They didn't just disrespect him, they despised him. They saw him as a simple-minded tool, a means to an end, a signature on a dotted line. His hands were still resting on the steering wheel. He looked down at them, at the calluses on his palms, the grease under one of his nails he couldn't quite scrub out. These were the hands that had fixed their leaky faucet, that had changed the oil in Tanya's $38,000 Acura RDX, that had held her when she cried over some petty slight. These were the hands of the man they thought was a fool. Inside the quiet cab of his Peterbilt, a place that had always been his sanctuary, Darius Jackson made a decision. He would not pout. He would not get angry. He would not get in his truck and go back to work. He would do what he did best. He would see the entire board, plan his route, check his equipment, and execute his run with cold, methodical precision. Only this time, the load wasn't auto parts, and the destination wasn't Dallas. It was justice. He put the truck in gear. The air brakes hissed, a sound like a giant sigh of release. He pulled away from the curb on Kirkwood Avenue, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He didn't look back at the grand colonial house, where his wife and his mother-in-law were celebrating their victory. In his mind, that house, and the woman inside it, had already ceased to exist. 10 minutes down the road, his phone buzzed. A text from Tanya. The screen glowed with her name and a string of heart emojis. Drive safe, baby. Thinking of you. Love you. The hypocrisy was so blatant it was almost absurd. He stared at the message for a long moment. The old Darius would have replied instantly, with a matching string of hearts. The new Darius, the one forged in the cold fire of the last 5 minutes, considered his options. Silence would raise suspicion. A normal reply was required. He had to maintain the facade just for a little while longer. He needed time. He pulled into the parking lot of a Waffle House on the outskirts of Nashville, the bright yellow sign a beacon in the gray morning. He typed back a simple, devastatingly normal reply. You too. See you Thursday. He didn't add love you. It was a small omission, a tiny act of rebellion they would never notice. But for him, it was everything. It was the first brick laid in the foundation of his new life. He needed to get off the grid, to create a plausible reason for staying in Nashville. He called his dispatcher, Earl, a gruff but fair man he'd known for a decade. Earl, it's Darius, he said, forcing a note of weary frustration into his voice. Hey, listen, I've got a problem. The check engine light is on, and one of the turbo sensors is flashing red. I'm not comfortable taking her all the way to Dallas like this. I'm going to have to scrub the run and take her into the Peterbilt Service Center. Damn, Jackson. You sure? Earl asked, the sound of shuffling papers in the background. That's a priority load? I'm sure, Earl. I'd rather be safe than stranded on the side of I-40. You know I don't cancel runs unless it's serious. This was true. His record was spotless. He was reliable to a fault, a quality Patrice and Tanya had mistaken for a lack of ambition. All right, keep me posted, Earl grumbled. Let me know what the shop says. Will do, Darius said and hung up. He had just bought himself at least 24 hours. He sat in the cab, the engine now off, the silence profound. He needed to think, to plan. His mind, accustomed to navigating complex logistics, road closures, and delivery windows, began to work on this new, more personal problem. He needed evidence. He had the recording, but he needed the paperwork. He needed a lawyer. A memory of his grandmother Alara surfaced. She had been a fiercely intelligent woman, mistrustful of smooth talkers and complicated contracts. When she had left him the duplex, she had sat him down at her kitchen table. Darius, she'd said, her hand covering his, this house is yours. Not yours and some future wife's, yours. People change, love can fade, but land is always land. I've had my lawyer, Marcus Thorne, draw up a paper, a separate property affidavit. You sign it, you file it, and you keep a copy somewhere safe. It means this house stays in the Jackson family no matter what. At the time, he'd felt it was unnecessary, a little cynical. He was young and in love. But he had done it, out of respect for her. He'd signed the affidavit before he and Tanya were even married, had it notarized, and filed it with the county clerk's office. He had a copy in a fireproof safe box under his bed. A box Tanya didn't know existed. Marcus Thorne. The name was a lifeline. Mr. Thorne was more than a lawyer. He was a pillar of the North Nashville black community, a man who had handled his family's affairs for 2 generations. He was old school, sharp as a tack, and had no patience for foolishness. Darius didn't go home. He couldn't risk Tanya or Patrice dropping by and finding his truck there. He drove to a public library in a part of town he never frequented. He sat in the quiet, sterile environment, surrounded by the smell of old paper and disinfectant, and looked up the number for Thorne and Associates on Jefferson Street. His heart was hammering in his chest, not with fear, but with a grim, focused energy. He was no longer just a trucker. He was a man gathering his weapons for a war he never wanted to fight but was now determined to win. Marcus Thorne's office was in a historic brick building that had housed black-owned businesses for over a century. The inside was paneled in dark wood. The furniture was old but immaculate, and the air smelled of leather and lemon polish. It was a place of quiet dignity and established power. Marcus Thorne himself was in his late 70s, a tall, slender man with a crown of silver hair and eyes that had seen everything. He wore a perfectly tailored three-piece suit, a crisp white shirt, and a gold pocket watch. He greeted Darius with a firm handshake and a warm, sad smile. "Darius Jackson, you have your grandmother's eyes," he said, his voice a deep, comforting baritone. "I was sorry to hear of her passing. Elara was a fine woman, a very, very smart woman. Now, your call was urgent. Sit. Tell me what's happened." Darius sat in the plush leather chair opposite the massive oak desk. He took a deep breath and laid it all out, his voice calm and even, recounting the events of the morning without emotion, like a driver reciting the details of an accident report. He told Thorne about the early morning drop-off, the dash cam, and the exact words he had heard Patrice say. Then he took out his phone, placed it on the desk, and played the recording. The clear, condescending voice of Patrice filled the quiet office. "Trucker husband sign whatever we send. Tanya knows how to handle him. He'll pout, and then he'll get in his truck and go back to work. That's what men like him do." Thorne listened, his face impassive, his fingers steepled under his chin. When the recording finished, he was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "Well," Thorne said finally, his voice dangerously soft, "that is as clear a statement of fraudulent intent as I have ever heard in my 50 years of practicing law." He swiveled in his chair and accessed his digital files on a large monitor. Elara was insistent. She saw the world with clear eyes. He typed for a moment, and then a scanned document appeared on the screen. It was the separate property affidavit, dated June 12, 2017. There was Darius's signature, a notary's seal, the official stamp from the Davidson County Clerk's office. It was ironclad. "Darius, this document is your shield," Thorne said, turning back to him. "The duplex is your sole and separate property, acquired by inheritance prior to the marriage. Your wife has no legal claim to it, none. What they are attempting with this quitclaim deed is fraud, plain and simple, possibly felony-level property theft, given the value." Darius felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled him. His grandmother, years after her death, was still protecting him. "So what do we do?" Thorne's eyes gleamed with a strategist's fire. "We do not react. We act. They believe you are hundreds of miles away. They believe you are ignorant. We will use that. Their arrogance is their weakness, and it will be their undoing." He picked up his phone. "They have an appointment with a notary at 10 a.m., you said, to file the deed. What is the name of the title company?" Darius's mind raced. Tanya had mentioned it once, complaining about the drive. "It's on the west side. Commonwealth Title, I think. On West End Avenue." Thorne was already looking it up. He found the number, and his finger hovered over the dial button. "Here is the plan. I will contact the branch manager. I will inform her that a fraudulent transfer is being attempted on a property owned by my client. I will email her a copy of this affidavit and a secure link to your audio recording. We will request that she allow the appointment to proceed, but to halt it at the final moment. We need them to be in the act." He looked at Darius. "This will be difficult, but it is the cleanest, most decisive way to stop this and to create unimpeachable evidence for the divorce proceedings and any criminal complaints we choose to file. The total cost for this initial action, including filing the divorce petition this afternoon, will be a $5,000 retainer." Darius didn't hesitate. The emergency savings account funded by the rent from the second unit had over $20,000 in it. I have it. Let's do it. Good man, Thorne said, a flicker of a smile on his lips. Your grandmother would be proud. They thought they were dealing with a simple trucker. They are about to discover they are dealing with Alara Jackson's grandson. The strike was executed with the quiet precision of a military operation. At 9:45 a.m., Marcus Thorne placed the call to Sharon Mills, the branch manager at Commonwealth Title. Darius sat across the desk, listening to Thorne's side of the conversation, his heart a steady, heavy drum in his chest. Mr. Thorne, I have your email, Sharon's voice said, tinny but clear on the speakerphone. I've reviewed the affidavit and I've listened to the recording. This is unbelievable. They are in my lobby right now, Patrice and Tanya Carter. That is correct, Ms. Mills, Thorne said, his voice calm and authoritative. They are attempting to defraud my client, Darius Jackson, the legal and sole owner of the property, at 1412 Booker Street. We are asking for your cooperation in stopping this illegal act. Of course, Sharon said, her voice shaking slightly with anger. What do you need me to do? Instruct your notary, Linda, I believe her name is, to proceed with the meeting as planned. Let them present the deed. Let her review the signatures. Then, just before she applies her official seal, have her state that she needs to make a final verification call. She will call you at your desk, and you will instruct her that a legal hold has been placed on the property by the owner's counsel, and the transaction cannot be completed. I understand, Sharon said. They are walking into the conference room with her now. Thank you, Ms. Mills. You are doing the right thing, Thorne said. Please, keep the line open if you can. An agonizing silence followed. Darius could picture the scene perfectly. The sterile conference room with its bland corporate art, the polished table. Patrice, confident and imperious, in one of her expensive suits. Tanya playing the role of the dutiful wife, a nervous excitement in her eyes. They would be smiling, making small talk with the notary, believing they were minutes away from securing their prize. The dramatic irony was thick enough to taste. They had no idea what was coming. Minutes crawled by. Darius stared at the speakerphone as if he could will it to speak. Then, a click, and Linda the notary's voice came on the line, low and professional. Sharon, it's Linda in conference room B. I have the quitclaim deed for 1412 Booker Street. The signatures appear to be in order. I'm ready to notarize. Linda, Sharon's voice was firm, all business now. You will not complete this transaction. A legal hold has just been placed on the property by the owner's attorney. The transfer is frozen, effective immediately. Understood, Linda said. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, through the phone, they heard Linda's voice, now directed at the room. Okay, I just need to make one quick call to verify a file number, and then we can proceed. A calculated pause. Darius held his breath. Then Linda spoke again, her tone now carrying a distinct, professional chill. Ma'am, I'm afraid we can't complete this transaction. There appears to be a legal hold placed on this property as of 5 minutes ago. The silence that followed was profound. Then Patrice's voice, sharp with disbelief and fury. What? What are you talking about? A legal hold? On whose authority? Linda's reply was a hammer blow, delivered with devastating calm. On the authority of the owner, Darius Jackson, through his legal counsel, Marcus Thorne. A choked gasp. It was Tanya. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. That's impossible, Patrice's voice rose, cracking with rage. He's in Texas. He doesn't even have a lawyer. This is some kind of mistake. You will complete this transaction right now. Ma'am, I cannot, Linda said, her voice unyielding. My instructions are clear. The meeting is over. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is outrageous. I want to speak to your manager, Patrice demanded. My manager is the one who gave me the instruction, Linda replied coolly. A strangled, high-pitched sound cut through the air. It was the beginning of a sob, a shriek of thwarted greed and sudden, terrifying exposure. It was the sound of Tanya's world collapsing. Darius listened to the chaos, the indignant shouting from Patrice, the frantic weeping from his wife, and he felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness where his love for her used to be. The strike had been a success. The first battle was won. The consequences began to cascade almost immediately. The first voicemail arrived on Darius's phone at 10:17 a.m., just minutes after Patrice and Tanya were unceremoniously escorted from the Commonwealth title office. It was Tanya, her voice a frantic, breathless whisper. Darius? Baby, where are you? The weirdest thing just happened. Call me. There's some kind of mistake at the title company. Call me as soon as you get this. Her tone was one of forced confusion, still trying to play the part of the innocent wife. He saved the voicemail and did not reply. The second call came at 10:45 a.m. It was Patrice, and the pretense of confusion was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. Darius Jackson, you listen to me, she shrieked into the phone. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you have made a grave mistake. We have a signed document. It is legal. We will see you in court. You will not get away with humiliating me like this. You will regret this for the rest of your miserable life. He saved the voicemail. At 11:30 a.m., a text from Tanya. Darius, answer your phone. My mother is freaking out. What did you do? Why would you do this to us? The us was a dagger she was trying to twist, a last-ditch attempt to claim solidarity. While the voicemails and texts flooded in, Marcus Thorne was methodically dismantling their lives. He filed the petition for divorce on Darius's behalf, citing fraud and irreconcilable differences. A process server was dispatched to the Belmead address. Thorne also drafted a formal criminal complaint with the Davidson County District Attorney's Office, attaching the audio file and a sworn statement from Sharon Mills at the title company as evidence. An investigator was assigned to the case by 2 p.m. The next voicemail from Tanya came at 3:15 p.m. Her voice was completely different. The anger was gone, replaced by the raw, ragged edge of panic. She was crying, deep, shuddering sobs. Darius. Oh God, Darius. A man just came to the door. He served me with divorce papers. Divorce? Baby, no, please. We can fix this. It was my mother's idea, I swear. She pushed me into it. She said it was the only way for us to have a good life. Please, just talk to me. I love you. Don't do this. He saved the voicemail, the lie so blatant it was almost pitiable. The downfalls were swift and brutal. 1. The legal implosion. Patrice's high-powered attorney, a man who moved in the same social circles, received a courtesy call from Marcus Thorne. After hearing a brief professional summary of the evidence, including the existence of a crystal-clear audio recording of his client admitting to fraudulent intent, he dropped Patrice as a client in a one-sentence email. The potential damage to his own reputation was too great. Patrice was left scrambling to find new counsel, a task made nearly impossible, as word of the fraud complaint began to quietly circulate in Nashville's tight-knit legal community. 2. The financial exposure. The DA's office informed Patrice that, due to the value of the property involved, she and Tanya were being investigated for felony property theft by deception, a Class B felony in Tennessee, carrying a potential prison sentence of 8 to 12 years and fines up to $25,000. Their assets were at risk of being frozen pending the investigation. 3. The social annihilation. Belmead was a community built on a fragile ecosystem of reputation, trust, and old money. The story, leaked with surgical precision, was devastating. Patrice Carter, the savvy real estate maven, had tried to swindle her own son-in-law, a hard-working long-haul trucker, out of his dead grandmother's house. It was a story that was both sordid and delicious to her rivals. Her phone stopped ringing with invitations. Clients began canceling their listings with her brokerage, which had been built entirely on her personal brand. Her name, once a symbol of success, was now synonymous with disgrace. The $1.2 million house became a gilded prison. 4. The marital dissolution. Darius, on the advice of Thorne, systematically severed every tie. He closed their joint bank account, which contained only a few $100s of his own money. He had Tanya's name removed from his truck insurance and his health benefits. He changed the locks on the duplex in Bordeaux and had a no trespassing sign installed on the lawn. He blocked both their numbers on his phone, directing all future communication to go through his attorney. The silence he imposed was more damning than any angry tirade. It told them they no longer existed in his world. By sunset, the coordinated strike was complete. Darius stood on the porch of his duplex, the new keys feeling heavy and solid in his pocket. He looked at the simple brick house, the neat lawn, the sturdy roof he had patched himself. It was still his. He had almost lost it all, not to a storm or a fire, but to a quiet betrayal dressed in a loving smile. He had held the line. He had protected his grandmother's legacy. He felt no triumph, only a deep, profound, and weary peace. 1 year later, the rain of that terrible morning was a distant memory. The Nashville sun, bright and healing, streamed down on the small, lovingly tended garden behind the duplex on Booker Street. Darius knelt on the soft earth, his hands no longer covered in road grime but in rich soil, gently tending to a row of burgeoning tomato plants. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It had been a quiet affair. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Tanya and Patrice had agreed to an uncontested settlement. Tanya walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and the crushing weight of her choices. The criminal investigation had resulted in a plea deal, 2 years of probation, and a permanent mark on their records, a public stain that effectively ended Patrice's career. Darius had asked for no restitution beyond his legal fees, which totaled nearly $15,000. His victory was not in punishing them, but in freeing himself. He had forgiven them, not for their sake, but for his. He had learned from Marcus Thorne that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. He had let it go, releasing it into the wind on some long, lonely stretch of highway in Wyoming. The biggest change, however, was not inside him, but right next door. The second unit of the duplex, once a simple rental, had been transformed. A new sign, beautifully carved from a piece of oak, hung above the door. Elara's Haven. After everything had settled, Darius had realized that the duplex was more than just a property. It was a sanctuary. He thought of all the other drivers out there, men and women like him, living their lives in 10-hour shifts, sleeping in noisy truck stops, eating overpriced, unhealthy food. He knew the bone-deep weariness, the loneliness of the road. Using the money from the savings account, he had renovated the second unit. He hadn't just cleaned it up, he had poured his heart into it. It was now a free, safe, and comfortable rest stop for long-haul truckers passing through Nashville. There were 2 clean bedrooms, with comfortable queen-sized beds and high-quality $150 blackout curtains. The kitchen was fully stocked with coffee, bread, eggs, and other basics, paid for out of his own pocket. A new high-efficiency washer and dryer, a $1,200 set from LG, stood ready in a small utility room. The living room had a comfortable sofa, a large-screen TV, and the fastest Wi-Fi he could get, a $90 a month fiber optic plan. Drivers booked a spot through a simple private website he'd built. They could stay for up to 48 hours, no questions asked. a place to get a hot shower, do laundry, cook a real meal, and sleep in a real bed. He had created a small piece of home on the road for his fellow knights of the highway. His life was smaller now, in a way, but infinitely richer. He still drove, but he took shorter runs, preferring to be home more often. He had reconnected with old friends, joined a local community gardening club. The rent from the first unit, now occupied by a young black family with a small child, was enough to cover the taxes and upkeep for the entire property, including the operating costs for Alara's haven. Sometimes he would sit on his porch in the evening and talk with a driver staying next door, sharing stories of the road, of bad weather, and good dispatchers. He saw the gratitude in their eyes, the relief on their tired faces, and he knew he had found his true purpose. True wealth, he had come to understand, wasn't about leveraging assets or climbing a social ladder. It wasn't a number in a bank account or the address of your house. It was about what you build, what you give, and the legacy you leave behind. Patrice and Tanya had seen his duplex as a thing to be taken and sold, a mere $350,000 on a ledger. He had turned it into something priceless, a place of rest, a bastion of community, a testament to the quiet dignity of a working man, and a living tribute to the grandmother who had taught him the meaning of solid ground. The best revenge is not a life destroyed, but a life well lived. And Darius was living his one safe harbor at a time. What do you think is the true measure of a person's wealth? Is it the things they own or the community they build? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And please remember to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of resilience and justice.